What's up, everybody? It's me, Casual TF2. I hope you're having a great December so far. Hope you're really enjoying it, doing your best. I'm watching you. And now you're watching me. And so today, I've been inspired to talk a bit off the cheek, off the tongue, a bit free form, and I'm going to share some stories from me to you, I guess from my life. So this was inspired because I was going through an old phone of mine the other day. I was trying to find something, and I ended up scrolling through a bunch of notes that I had made a long time ago. There was, random ideas I'd written down, lists of music that I wanted to listen to, little observations on life, some half-formed plans, all the stuff most people probably have in their notes. But I found myself being shocked at how much I'd forgotten all that, how much I'd forgotten about my life and what it was like many years ago. And in my life so far, there's definitely been some strangeness in how my relationship with my own memory has changed. Because when I was growing up, through my childhood and adolescence, all the way until probably like age 19, I would have described myself as a person who had perfect memory. Like straight up very, very good. Those moments that kind of reveal it, where somebody tells you a story and they forgot they'd already told it to you, or maybe everyone's trying to remember some detail, like, oh, whose house were we at that one time? Whenever those sort of things would happen, whether it was with my friends or my family, it was always sort of a shock to me that, oh, not everyone remembers that. So often people were trying to wonder or they'd tell me something that they already had, and I'd be like, oh, I remember it, they don't, whatever. So I'm not saying I had some kind of like photographic memory and, I slept through school because I could memorize things instantly. It wasn't like that. But it was more so just that I tended to remember a lot of banal details from things that happened in life that a lot of other people just didn't think to remember. And they were also there, but they often just wouldn't remember those things. And I don't want to talk this part to death, but basically I'm providing context because I got older, life got crazy, was crazy in many ways, and my memory drastically declined. So I went from being this person that was like, yo, my memory, best in this fucking room, guaranteed, to nowadays I kind of have more of like a normal average memory is my sense. But it's taken me a few years to find some peace with that, because when you go from being so high up, like compared to the memory I was used to having my whole life, I for a while, and still do, but working on it, doing better, feel now extremely dumb because I didn't know what it's like to remember everything all the time, So that's that. I noticed this decline. My memory got worse, and it's a complicated topic. But if I were to explain my feelings and how I understand why that change in memory happened, simply, I would say that it reached a point where the amount of stuff I was remembering, and also sort of my fixation on browsing my own memories, was becoming more of a problem for me than it was an asset. So it kind of should have happened. And I just sort of reached a soft limit, it felt like, too. You have those times where you're a kid and you can devote yourself to memorizing every little detail because it's just like, it doesn't seem like your memory is going to run out. It seems like you have infinite storage space, so to speak. So I would always be recounting in my mind, okay, what happened yesterday in the morning? What happened after that? What did I have to eat? What did I do this? Blah, 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 blah. What happened after, sort of looking back on my recent experiences and always trying to recite them back as accurately and detailed as possible. Like, I don't want to forget. I want to remember everything that's ever happened all the time, Anyway, I really swear I didn't start recording to talk about memory, but the point of all of this is I'm looking through my old notes and I'm reminded of all this old stuff that I used to remember everything. So this is a new phenomenon for me to be like, oh, wow, I forgot all this. I forgot that this was all bouncing around in my brain. I forgot all those old experiences I had. And that phenomenon has inspired me today to start sharing some of my stories, sharing some of my life, because if I don't share it, they might as well just disappear and be forgotten, those bits of my life. And a lot of stuff is forgotten in life, and that's okay. But if we forget everything, I mean, who's gonna tell the good stories around the campfire, right? We need a little bit of the, I don't want to say the oral tradition, but the tradition of telling things by word of mouth. That's how we learn. That's how humans do things. Stories, they're important. So right now, I'm focusing in on this topic of long, long days. And long days are something I started experiencing when I was probably 16 or 17. So kind of like a lot of people from middle school into high school, I started becoming more of a night owl progressively year by year. which I think is understandable at that age. There's some solace in the quiet time you find staying up late, and it's probably also just a form of procrastination because you don't want to wake up to go to school. But there came a particular time where I became increasingly more curious about sleep. I wanted to learn a lot about sleep. I was thinking a lot about sleep. What is this sleep thing? What is this about? This is weird. How does it affect us? How do people sleep, right? Why? Blah, 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 blah. Around this age, I started thinking, I don't know, more out of the box in general about a lot of things I'd taken for granted, right? Maybe I always had a somewhat out of the box approach, but I was starting to apply that thing to like those things you just don't really consider that are so fundamental to our lives, you know? And so I started learning like, you know, the fun stuff like polyphasic sleep cycles, which is, you know, it's good brain food if you haven't looked into it. It can be nice to fantasize gaming yourself into sleeping 3 hours a day or something. But also, I'm not really inspired by strict routines, so I don't think it was really destined for me, which is pretty essential. I think the Uberman sleep schedule was you sleep 20 minutes 5 times a day, but you have to do it exactly equidistant. The times have to be like perfectly on the dot. Okay, now I got to do 20 minutes, or else you screw it up. I'm sure you can read like a million reports of people trying to get on the Uberman sleep schedule, and the transition period is impossible. But anyway, I wasn't. Yeah, I was like, this is not going to happen. I'm not the good candidate for the crazy polyphasic strict sleep stuff. So what I was into was seeing how long I could stay awake. And I really don't get why I did that or how it even started. It definitely was a natural attraction. And I think for most people, the most basic concept of this is going to be an all-nighter. So for whatever reason, you have to skip one night of sleep. Maybe you were studying all night, maybe you were partying, and then you're usually prompted by, you know, some daily obligation going into school or work that's going to force you to stay awake through the next day after not sleeping, right? That's your basic all-nighter. And most people, I think, see this as more so like a hellish trial you have to endure sometimes. And so something that this brings me to, which I found interesting, was that a characteristic trait of mania, which is the antithetical state to a depressive episode that would make you qualify for being considered bipolar, a characteristic trait of mania is not sleeping. Feeling super energized without sleeping much at all, staying awake for multiple days at a time. This is typical for a manic episode. And so this was probably my first big consideration that I relished in, that wow, if you stay awake for a long time because you're forced to, which is often a traditional all-nighter, it sucks. Or these are the reports often. But if you stay awake for a long time because you want to, maybe it doesn't suck. Maybe could it even be fun or enjoyable? So at the end of high school, I basically start to annihilate any semblance of a coherent sleep schedule for myself and start experimenting. I start staying awake basically whenever I feel like it, you know? And often I push myself to see just how long I could stay awake. And so the most fundamental thing you start to pick up on when you do this is that you're going to get tired. And this is what happens, you know, every day. Normally at the end of the day, most people get tired. And of course, if we push through this tiredness, but only if you push through this tiredness, you get a second wind. And this is something even people with the most, you know, rigid sleep schedule will run into. They'll have surely experienced it, as we've all been in some kind of state where we're sleepy or tired and have to stay awake, and then we later realize, oh wow, this is nice. I feel good again, even though I was just really tired. And so this sort of pattern keeps happening as you continue to stay awake. So maybe you'll feel tired after being awake for 16 hours. And then you'll wake up again for a couple hours. And then you'll get tired again and really want to sleep. But if you push through that one, again, you get another one. And this kind of cycles a few times till eventually, if you push through on one of these waves of tiredness, you're going to feel really good and awake again, but like forever. Like it doesn't, the cycle stops repeating. And so I find with myself, there's a certain point I need to hit where it's not my second wind, not my third wind, not my fourth wind, maybe my fifth wind or something, where you start to feel wide awake in a distinctly unusual way that just does not go away. And so to be reasonable about it, I would interpret this as your body finally giving in, right? And saying, okay, I get it. You want to be awake, or you have to be awake, right? if you think about this in a survival circumstance, like if you're forced to do a bit more work to survive in a day as a hunter-gatherer, and you have to stay up and be extra sleepy, I have to do this extra thing to survive, your body is still going to make you sleepy because it wants you to sleep. It wants you to rest, which is really good for all kinds of biological functions, and it's basically looking out for your net health, right? Tomorrow, it's going to be useful if you fall asleep soon, so you're going to feel a bit sleepy. But in the case that some crazy shit goes down, like there's a big bad tiger or something hanging out where you sleep, maybe you have to keep staying up like way later than you're used to. And for a while, your body's going to be like, yeah, just go find a new place to sleep. Just chill out. Just get some rest. We want that for you. Because your body still sees it, it's for a while, it's still in good interest to go get some sleep. Even if there's some small danger or little inconvenience that's kind of out of the norm. Because it doesn't happen super easily that you would kind of get into this hyper awake state. And also, by the way, I'm talking about this kind of strangely. I don't mean to put so much emphasis on the idea that your body is this separate sentient thing with its own desires, but also you can look at it that way if you want. I don't really mind. But I'm just using the verbiage of your body wants you to sleep in the same way that I would say your body, quote unquote, makes you hungry so that you need to eat, right? So that you can survive. Anyway, you keep getting disturbed by this tiger. You're not allowed to sleep. And at some point, your body's going to drop the objective of trying to sleep, because in this type of situation, you've already been at it for a long time. You're in a hunter-gatherer state of nature. It's probably you're getting fucking chased, or you're in a critical life or death scenario, and that's why you've not been able to rest. You've been staying awake too long. You have to stay vigilant for some reason. So the body, at some point, its instincts, its good survival genes, whatever it is, goes, okay, we're just going to be wide fucking awake, because even though it's a bad strategy for how healthy you're going to be tomorrow and you do need sleep, it's going to completely fuck us if we're a little sleepy and then get fucking killed by this tiger that's been chasing us for 2 days nonstop, right? That's a long hypothetical, but hopefully you get what I mean. That's to me the most coherent explanation of why our bodies would work like that and have this mode that you eventually get into and you keep putting off sleep, where it just goes, oh man, okay, let's be awake. We're going to be awake now. So I started doing this, the staying up late thing, somewhat frequently, where I'd try to reach that point. Because once I found it was there, I was like, oh man, this is kind of interesting. Finding that spot where the body no longer tries to make you sleepy. And for me, this is almost always at least 24 hours in. And sometimes maybe it doesn't even come until like 30 hours, 36 hours. I hear a lot of people, tell me they haven't experienced this feeling even when they've been up, like had an all-nighter, And I probably partially attribute that to the fact that they really just didn't want to be awake to begin with, because I do think that matters. If you're just going, fuck this, I want to sleep, fuck this, I want to sleep, every 5 minutes after you've been awake for too long, I feel like you're never going to hit that good point of raw, sleepless survival mode, adrenalized euphoria or whatever. And the slightly scary or dangerous thing, too, about when you reach this mode is that you actually have to make a very deliberate effort to go to sleep. Otherwise, you're just not going to fall asleep. You're not going to feel like you need to. So personally, I've never stayed awake longer than 48 hours for health reasons. I just say, I'm going to call it here, When I have been awake that long, I literally have to lie down and try to sleep, because I'm not tired, and it takes me a while to wind down. And it's funny because it's literally so much easier for me to fall asleep after I've been awake for, let's say, 16 hours than it is for me to fall asleep after 48 hours of being awake, right? And that can be a little freaky too, where you're lying down and thinking, shit, am I going to sleep again? I'm not tired at all, But yeah, you'll sleep again. It just takes a little more time. And so you can probably definitely explain this as your body has just pumped you up with a ton of adrenaline and good feeling endorphins and all this stuff to compensate for your sleep deprivation. And it sounds really lame when you put it like that, but the way I would say it is that the joys of staying awake for a long time are something I can't explain to you if you haven't experienced it. Because it's not like the same joy you experience in the rest of your life, or like the same awakeness you experience when you wake up after, a long night of sleep or whatever. And in fact, that kind of awakeness you feel after being awake for 30 hours is so different from what it normally feels like to be awake, to just be like, oh yeah, I'm really awake. It's quite different. I suppose I can only speak for myself, but for me, it really imbues a sense of hopefulness. All of life feels a bit more beautiful when I've been awake for a long time like that. There's something amazing about looking back and thinking about all the things you've done on this very long day and what an epic journey it's been, this super long odyssey you've experienced just today. It feels like you're looking back on this miniature life you've had on this day, you know, and you're reminiscing. You're just thinking at the end, wow, knowing that your time's going to come and you're about to give in to unconsciousness. And this is where my next big theory about sleep and life emerged from when I was a bit younger, that the lifespan of a person, you can almost compare it to the trajectory of a day. When you wake up in the morning, you have this sort of young primal energy like a kid. And some kids maybe are a bit sleepy. It's a loaded metaphor or something. But before you go to sleep, you're weak. You're tired. You're like an old person, you know? And to elaborate, because I know this is kind of a loose comparison, but there's some stuff there. I find that the things you do in those first couple hours of the day are very important for how the rest of your day is going to turn out, how your overall day will be. Like if you get really shitty news in the beginning of a day, it totally sets things up in a certain way that might be hard to get over, or vice versa if it's a positive thing early on. And we all know it's a lot easier to, let's say, start your day getting the quote-unquote serious work done first. That works well. Before we play, do our serious work. And fuck, like the whole world figured that one out and built civilization on that model. You go everywhere. That's how it works. And it's just the natural emergent system that fucking works. It's you wake up, you go to work, you do your part, and then you relax after, not the other way around. There's a reason for that. And in the same way, if you really fuck up, whatever that means to you, whether it's doing something negative or just eating candy and playing games, whatever it is, if you really fuck up those first 2 hours of the day, you might accidentally fuck up your whole day. And likewise, if you fuck up the first 5-10 years of your life, you might be very fucked up for a long time. And probably the more fair way to phrase that is that if other people fuck up the first 5 to 10 years of your life, you might be very fucked up for your life. At least the difference is that you have complete control as an adult over the first hour of your day, wherefore as a kid, you basically have no control of your first few years and how they're going to be. You're just kind of hoping you won the lottery with having good parents. So anyway, I started wondering if old age and death worked kind of like going to sleep did. It seems like how long we stay awake is very affected by our attitude towards it. At the end of the day, are we yearning for rest? Are we yearning for more? Are we satisfied? Have we had enough? And can we say the same about life? You know, how important is a will to live and how long you actually live? There's something to think about there. And how can you explain those anomalies of the people who very strangely live to crazy ages like 120 or 130? You know, obviously you can say, oh, the statistics, it has to work out. Some people have to live so long. And it's like, sure, but why? Why do those? Because you could also just be describing a distribution of demeanors and attitudes about life. You could also just say, yeah, well, somebody's bound to have that kind of attitude towards life that allows them to live way too fucking long, right? Because it's not, sure, they're not, you know, usually the people that have trashed their bodies the worst, but there's also some weird exceptions where it's like, why is this person living so long, or why does this person fucking die at 50, right? And I know some of you might not be down for that conversation yet. The whole what? How much of your physical health is connected to your mental, spiritual soul, your other you health? Whoa. No. Just take your good medicine. Okay. Anyway, but to put it very simply, I don't think it's possible to live that long if you have a super shit attitude, right? So at least there's a little some in there. You got to give that to me. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you, and I could probably go into each of these things I've mentioned in better detail and more detail for a whole long video. But I wanted to just give a little context before I dive into some specific memories I had of particular days where I was awake for a very long time. So the first one, as some of you know, I lived in England for a few years, and it's become quite common that I mean, in my life, you tell me about yours, the crunch time before moving always makes for this super stressful, but usually epic occasion, right? There's this sort of dramatic closure. You're saying goodbye to the place you've called home. You're saying goodbye to the people you're very close with there. And then there's also the very real nightmare of having to move 100% of your stuff. Because that can be hard enough to prepare for when you actually are able to move it all. But when you move internationally, it's this extra nightmare because you literally need to minimize your stuff to what you can carry on an airplane. Assuming that you, of course, don't have the crazy funds to do the really expensive options to ship your stuff overseas, whatever, which is, it's really not efficient. It's really not good. And at this point, I already made the mistake in the past of not really preparing so much for moving as I should have, and doing some crazy last minute packing, panicking, all the stuff last minute. So I, at least at this point, for the story I'm about to tell, was starting to do a better job. I understood, okay, I got to downsize, I got to sell things in advance. But even for as much as I had downsized and sold things, you've been living somewhere for 3 years, you accumulate stuff. It's hard to condense your life into what you can bring on an airplane. It's really difficult, right? Most people, I don't think, could even carry just their wardrobe, just their clothes, jackets, shoes with them on a plane. They couldn't carry all of it if they had to, right? Most of us just have too much stuff. I'm not a very materialistic person, but I have instruments. I like to read books. I wear clothes. And all these little things start to add up when you're trying to, again, carry it on a plane. And so, of course, as you get closer to moving day, your desperation starts to increase if things aren't totally going to plan. So those speakers that you bought for $300, you're going to sell them for $100. You're going to sell them for $50. Just please, someone take these so I don't have to leave them on the sidewalk, right? And then on top of all the moving stresses, to make matters worse, there's also this pressure of you want to tie all your loose ends socially. You've met all these people here. You want to be spending your final days with them, with those people you might not see again for a very long time, maybe ever, right? You want to celebrate somehow. And naturally, for me, at some point, it all comes down to the wire, and you just try to jam in everything at the very end, and you do your best. So here's a bit about my final day before leaving England went. So we start things out. I'm waking up comfortably at 2 p.m. Except I didn't really. I only slept 3 hours, which I really did not set myself up well. But that was because I was already basically up the entire night before, packing and trying to put last minute ads up to get rid of the stuff that I still had not yet gotten rid of. And whatever else I was working on. There's too many things going on in my mind. I vividly remember at this time I was trying to finish mixing this music that I had recorded while I was still in this room and with the speakers that I had at the time. And so for those of you that might not be familiar with that concept, basically mixing is just a term that describes a lot of general post-processing you do to audio once you've recorded music, basically to make everything sound good. And a lot of making good sounding mixes and creating things in general that sound quote unquote good is being familiar with your listening tools, right? You can only make it sound as good as you're able to accurately hear it and perceive it, because that's the foundation which gives rise to everything, right? In the audio domain or whatever. Being familiar with your listening tools. So there's this obsession you can get into with calibrating your speakers and compensating for all the natural acoustic imperfections of your room. You try to deaden space because you don't want too much reverberation that's going to make things seem less dry than they really are. You're compensating for certain frequencies. There's nodes and antinodes in the room where things build up or they cancel out. Basically, sound is very imperfect, and it's complicated, and it's hard to control in a physical space. We get close to accuracy, but accuracy is different depending on where you are. And so there's a sense of having to get used to and benefiting from getting very comfortable with the speakers you're using, with the room that they are in. Because every room's a bit different, even with the same speakers, and of course every set of speakers is quite different. So it's a good thing to do when you do a lot of audio work. And I'm sure most competent sound people would generally prefer to work in a space that might be slightly less, slightly lower budget and more imperfect acoustically, but it's a space that they know really well and they know exactly what things sound like in that space, then they would prefer to work in a like objectively better space that they aren't used to working in. So that's the background info. I've been working in this space on these same speakers for almost 3 years. I've gotten very familiar with how things sound on them. I'm comfortable. It's the most comfortable place I have for making adjustments on the system because I've developed a good sense of how things should sound on them to sound good, right? Blah, blah, blah. This is like a very brief, simple explanation, but hopefully it paints a picture for the people who don't know what I'm talking about. This was one of those things that I was also sort of last minute trying to jam in. I was trying to make these adjustments to these recordings before I would leave this space and be in God knows what kind of environment with God knows what kind of speakers, new room that I wasn't going to be familiar with, right? So I wanted to get that done as well. That was also in the mix. Probably why I didn't sleep so well. So I've slept 3 hours. It's 2 p.m. The first thing I need to do, or ended up doing, is I have to box up some CDs. So I've accumulated some CDs in the time I've lived here in these 3 years. And they're almost all these sort of strange, rare releases that I've bidded on in auctions. And I know half of you guys are like, bruh, what's the point of CDs? And I mostly agree, but you run into this dilemma where you get into less popular music and there's just you're stuck in between a rock and a hard place sometimes where it's like you have to actually find and buy this CD sometimes to hear it in okay quality or to just even hear certain songs. Like maybe it's not even really on the internet at all. And so it was the type of thing where these CDs were probably only valuable to a distinct set of people who know who the bands are and whatever and like them. And the only person I know who like lives even remotely close and knows this music is this dude I talked to from the Netherlands. And so I basically last minute just say, hey man, I've got all these CDs. I have to get rid of them somehow. Give me your address. I can't take them home. Sort of last minute. We can figure it out later. If you owe me, you owe me. Maybe if you want to keep them, you keep them or sell them or something. But these can't end up in some random bin. Like these have to stay in the hands of people who care about them. I might be back here one day. I'll take them back. Who knows? But right now I have to mail them to you because I just can't feasibly bring them on the plane, and I don't want to throw them away. Right. So I box up the CDs. Get ready. I take them to the bus stop. Take them from the bus stop to the post office via the bus. That was good English. I'm glad I explained that. Now it's around 4 p.m., right? And of course, the post office, always a place that gives me loads of anxiety. I'm better with that now. I'm probably the best I've ever been with the post office, but it's still this place of unpredictability. And you know those insane, chaotic vibes. You walk in there and you're like, what the fuck happened here? You know what I'm talking about. So I actually knock it out, nothing too crazy. It all goes as planned. You try to be extra nice. They see you're sympathetic to the cause, to the insane hell that they work in, so they're like, all right, I'm not going to give this guy too much trouble. Lucky. All right, so I return home, and actually I did some of that aforementioned mixing for like the final hour. I was like, I just want to tweak it a bit more. Also, the long and short about that is my superstition is probably unnecessary. Yes, there was truth to it, but at the same time, I don't know. It really was not that bad for me to then get new speakers and be the next place. Anyway. Now it's around 6:30 p.m., so I've only been up 4.5 hours, and my friend Lars comes over because he has to pick up his snare drum, which for some reason he had just sort of left at my place. So I'm like, come on, you got to take this. And I also took the opportunity to give him some books, some tchotchkes. I'm realizing I can't take all this stuff. And Lars as well, he's like a sort of music friend, so I show him a bit of the mixes that I'm working on. And then while this is happening, I get a call on the phone, and it's one of the people saw my ad, and they showed up to buy my bass, which I was trying to sell. So I'm thinking I'm living on the 10th floor or something, so I go all the way down with the bass, meet him outside, and he doesn't seem impressed. He seems suspicious. He's like, how do I know it works? Which, it's a funny problem. It does make sense, but I've never run into it. I've done a handful of these sort of Craigslist or Gumtree, instrument exchanges or whatever with people, and this was actually the first time I'd run into it, and it was also one of the lowest cost exchanges I've done, so that was interesting. I was probably selling it at half the price it really should be sold at used, but I just had to sell it. So maybe he thought that was sketch or something. So anyway, I'm with Lars still, and I bring this random guy 10 floors up to my room so we can go, okay, I plug it into the speakers. Okay, look, it works. And he's like, all right, I'll buy it. He gets out of there. Lars leaves around the same time. That's great. One less item. That was important. But we got a lot more to get rid of. So next, a dude comes over named Jimmy, and he'd been kind of on the fence negotiating with me over this last week as to whether or not he was going to buy my speakers. I had these big studio monitors, and I was already willing to give him like a pretty good deal, but for whatever reason he had just been on the fence, and he really waited to the last minute. I was like, dude, you gotta come tonight or I don't know what's gonna happen to these. And maybe that gave him some leverage in the negotiation, but I really think he was just unsure for some reason. And you know, I get it. It can be a big investment, especially for our sensitive audio people. It's an important relationship to make. So I invite him to my place. I'm like, hey, you know, just come over, listen to some stuff on him, see what you think. And I remember I asked him what music he wanted to hear, and he asked for the first track from D'Angelo's Voodoo album, which I look back on now, and there's something nice about that memory. I really remember that, looking up that song from him and just playing it nice and loud in those speakers, and him being like, oh, okay. So we chatted about music a bit, and I tell him what I know about the speakers until he kind of gets to a point where he's happy, and we make a deal. And I feel happy for him too, because like, I would have killed for a deal like that. So he got a steal. You know, those were good speakers. So he fucking buys them. He buys them. I help him carry the speakers down 10 flights to his car. Next, I go to the kitchen. I'm like, all right, I got to use some of my last reserves, some of my last foodstuffs, which includes this like pumpkin bread mix. So I bake some pumpkin bread, and then I also have just like 6 eggs. I just fry 6 eggs or something. And so I'm eating the eggs, and now I'm talking to Xavier and Erica, and those are 2 of my roommates at the time. And I can't remember exactly who was staying and who was going, but it definitely seemed like most of us were moving at this point. So I remember Erica was doing her laundry while we chatted. I guess that was her thing she had to do last minute before she moved. And so around 9, we're talking, I'm eating eggs. By 9:30 p.m., Vincent arrives with Laura and Ricardo. So Vincent is a great Italian guy. He was one of my roommates. And then Laura and Ricardo were 2 other Italians that basically hung out at our place all the time, but they didn't actually live there. That's what the Italians are really good at. They're really good at hanging out, eating and drinking and having a good chat, you know? So we decide for this night that... I don't know how it worked like this, but we sort of collectively decided that Ricardo was going to make some pasta, you know? And it's always exciting when you have the Italians cook, because they're so judgmental and opinionated about the food, and, you know, there's these high standards they put on everything that usually make it pretty great for the rest of us, like, just because they're going to be fussy about it. So I go to the grocery with Ricardo, with Laura. We're going to buy some ingredients for the pasta. I have £6, I realize. I have £6 remaining on my Barclays account that I want to spend. And so I buy a bottle of wine, just a nice final token. And so we go back to the flat. Xavier, Erica, Laura, and now Lucy, my other housemate, has arrived. And we're socializing while Ricardo is preparing a delicious carbonara. And I'm sure it was fantastic. I don't really remember the carbonara. I remember specifically a different pasta dish that Vincent had made. Maybe he was the better chef. But anyway, I'm sure it was great. So we're starting to eat. We're starting to begin our great final night as housemates and as friends. So this was also a special occasion in that when Laura offered everybody some wine, Erica and Lucy both accepted, which was unusual because they usually had this very firm personal prohibition against any alcohol whatsoever. So it was quite the gesture for them to, you know, be like, all right, tonight we're going to drink with you for our final night. Because they'd usually hang out and not do that, you know, but hang out with the rest of us even if we were drinking. So it ended up, too, making for quite a funny time because Erica, who was always so adamant about not drinking, would be in your face about it. And you'd always wonder, like, why? And she just wouldn't really, just like, oh, come on, you know. And so she became super drunk, like way quick, and she just became the life of the party. She was totally uninhibited, and she's usually really intense, so she just had this like insane, amped up to 11 intense energy, and it was just making us all laugh and have such a great time. So we drink together, and we enjoy some final moments socializing until about 4:30 a.m. You know, our last night together, or at least for me, it was. I can't remember exactly everyone else's situation. So there was good finality to it too, though. You know, I remember some of us asking each other the question of when we're going to see each other again, kind of testing each other, testing the faith in our friendship, the friendships that we'd made, right? And how long will I see you again? Where am I going to see you again? Is that really going to happen, you know? Are we all just going to say optimistic things but never see each other again? Will we keep in touch? Will I see you again soon, in 5 years, in 10 years? You know, I really did wonder the answer to those questions myself, seeing as I was moving a continent away, pretty far away from these people. So in the same spirit as Erica and Lucy at the end of the night, I decided to honor our final moment, my final moment with Vincent, having the first cigarette of my life rolled by Vincent himself. And it was underwhelming, but it was the ceremonialness of it was a good experience. And so everyone's gone. I return to my room. The party is over. And that being said, I need to be out of here in 6 hours to catch my flight. I'm still not packed. I'm still not really 100% packed. And I also have this large, intimidating task of disassembling my PC. I'm going to rip all its guts out, leave the case, and somehow safely pack the parts. And to make matters worse, I'm very drunk. So it takes a bit longer than I'd like, but by 7 a.m., I had fully, handled the computer situation, and now I'm starting to move things out of my room. So I got to clean it a bit before I go, right? And I can feel the pressure. It's setting in how little time I have left and how much of just an incomplete state everything is still in. And so I'm definitely panicked, but I continue. I'm doing different packing methods. At the same time, I'm cleaning the room, and I got to clean my part of the kitchen cupboard out and throwing away tiny pointless things and little, all the little trinkets that you forget about. And this goes on until maybe 9:30 a.m. and Lars arrives again. And so he decided he was going to come back today to, maybe pick up some more things that I'd offered him yesterday, but he couldn't carry them home. He didn't have enough carry space, as we see being a very topical dilemma in this story. So he thought he was just coming to get a violin. I told him yesterday, I'm like, oh, see that violin? You can have it. I can't take the violin home. But of course, they're always being a lot more than I had imagined. He's taking other stuff home. He got my keyboard, he got a lamp, he got some cutting boards, this vinyl record. Right. And so now I'm managing to kind of do my final packing of stuffing all these items in, just almost no space left, because basically I had to fit everything into a soft shell guitar bag, a backpack, and then a large military grade duffel bag, which basically had most of my stuff. And so Lars was, in contrast to me, in a very jovial mood, which was nice. And, it was nice to see him again. He was probably like the best friend I'd made living there. And, I remember he helped me figure out some of those final packing decisions as I was not quite in my right mind. I was sobering up, but I'd still been running on 3 hours of sleep after being awake for 20. So, and some of those tough decisions where I decided to ditch my battle-damaged Converse shoes, which was really just a sentimental item. They were certainly worn down and not of much practical value to me anymore, especially to bring back. But, I had to make that decision. It was tough. And so I remember stuffing this massive book with fire and sword into a shallow crevice above the motherboard and this massive CPU cooler in my backpack. It was a delicate operation. And so I'm doing my thing, packing along. Lars is giving me some good feedback. And then we run into Erica. She occasionally pops in to chat with Lars while I'm sort of still panicking and trying to make sure I've accounted for everything. I was getting really disheveled and I was quite ungrounded. So Lars was a huge help to me in the sort of final basic cleaning tasks as well, which was fantastic. So I have my final goodbyes now with Lucy and Erica, who were the only two of my housemates that I ended up seeing that morning after. And now Lars and I head out of the flat, and on the way out, we actually end up running into someone else who's moving out and trying to get rid of stuff. And so he offers Lars this mic stand, who gladly takes it. And so Lars at this point is almost carrying as much stuff as me. He got quite a good free loot haul, I would say. So I hand in my keys. It's now 10:20 a.m. and I part ways, say my final goodbyes to Lars. And now the real journey begins, right? The actual traveling. So all of the anxieties are starting to come to mind of this part of the process that I haven't really thought about until getting to this point. And so I'm hurrying now to the first train station I have to get to with just so much overpack stuff, but I just barely miss the 10:24 train, and I ended up having to wait half an hour for the next one, which is definitely not the greatest start. And so this first train, I do get on it. It takes me to Clapham Junction, where I change to get on to another train, which goes to the airport. And so I make it to the airport, and to my gleeful surprise, the train barrier sort of gates accepted my commuting card, which I was very worried would not accept. I was worried it would not let me in, because usually you have to pay sort of a separate ticket, a separate fare to get to the airport from this particular route that I had taken. And for whatever reason, it just happened to work. So I was like, oh, thank God. Now at this point, it's almost noon. So I check in, I drop my checked bag off, which is a huge relief. And up until this point, I was panicking so much over whether I had exceeded the weight limit. This is the other thing you had to worry about the whole time is, okay, there's one thing of you have to bring only what you can carry with you. And then there's this fact of like, each bag, they'll charge you sometimes a ridiculous amount if you're over the weight capacity for it. And so at this point, when I'm arriving to check my bag, I've pretty much accepted there's no way. I'm like, this has to be over the weight limit. This is just too much. I violated it. They're going to charge me a fee. They're going to be mad. And ironically, there was no issue, despite it being 2.6 kilograms over the max weight. I remember watching them weigh it and seeing it. Oh my God, that is over. And then they just took it. So a great surprise. It was one of those rare moments where you really feel like life is actually a fair system that cuts you some slack when you've been giving it your all. So that was kind of nice. I hadn't eaten anything since the night before. And so I decided I would grab some food by my gate. I had some sort of Asian restaurant food, which was really nice. And, you know, I had some time before my flight to kill. And even when I think about this particular time back then, I can almost feel the pain just talking about it in my shoulders from this overly heavy backpack just tearing into my already sort of sleepless, sore muscles for the last hour or two I've been walking around. So I was incredibly thankful that none of my bags also had been inspected by security, because that was its own whole nightmare of like, I'm going to have to undo this meticulous packing job I did, you know, of the hodgepodge of PC parts, books, clothes, and music equipment. But it's all good now. I eat until about 1:35 p.m. I remember when I sat down, it was this stool, and I was just struggling to keep my back held up straight so much because it had no back support, right? And but by the end of the meal, I'd found stability. It had given me something, right? And I decided to treat myself too. It was a good experience. I had one of those blooming flower teas, and man, so soothing, so soothing. So I'm boarding the flight now. It's 2 p.m. I've been awake about 24 hours. It takes a little longer than normal to take off too. I think we leave around 3 p.m. And so in the ideal world, for a lot of people, this is where the story ends, right? You pass out on the flight for 10 hours while you hover over the Atlantic and have some nice dreams. And I know I hyped up all this stuff about it being so great when you're awake on purpose, right? And because you want to be. But I'll say with this story too, you know, and at this point in the story, there's so many stressful factors that were going on that I wasn't even really thinking about the paradigm of choice. You know, everything I'd done up until this point just happened to have the byproduct of not sleeping very much. It wasn't intentional. That being said, there was certainly some peaceful solace I had, and now being on the plane, I'd gotten this huge part of it done with, right? I'd made my flight, I'd moved out, I'd left behind a truly empty room, said my final goodbyes. I had a great last night, but I sure as hell was not able to sleep. And I'm a tall person, and all of you tall people immediately understand what I'm talking about, how difficult it is to sleep on a plane, unless you have some kind of Snorlax super stat that you can tap into sleeping upright or whatever. But I can definitely dream, I can fantasize about leaning my head down on that tray card, no, not the tray card, the table tray in front of you and passing out like you're at a desk in school, you know, sleeping through class. But unfortunately, my neck, my spine, it's too long for me to arch over in that position. I just can't do it. So And I think that's the only way I could have slept. So I don't remember much of what I did on the flight, but I'm sure there was just some peaceful reflection. You know, I could just finally chill and do nothing. And, you know, I'd been going nonstop for like 24 hours, and I could finally just take a moment, absorb what had happened, and accept the reality that that chapter in my life was ending, and a new one, I guess, was beginning, which is always strange. You know, funnily enough, when I moved to England, I had a similar experience where I'd not slept at all, you know, on the last day, and I spent half my time hanging out with friends, and then, you know, the whole night before just packing, and I was so unbelievably tired on the plane. But in that case, I was so tired I actually started drifting in and out of sleep, even in that upright position, and it was not normal sleep. It was weird. It was like I was getting some strange micro sleeps that I wasn't even conscious that I was asleep. It's like where you'd be like, oh yeah, I didn't fall asleep, but you did. Which I guess, you know, sleep is normally unconscious, but this was different, and it wasn't really that deep. And that time actually made for one of the most funny but embarrassing moments of my life, where the flight attendant is passing by and asked me, you know, do you want a drink? And I started talking to them while I was completely asleep. And so then I started returning to consciousness, like you're waking up. And what's this thing that you're waking up to? Oh, you're waking up to find yourself basically on the tail end of a conversation with somebody that you'd been like straight-facedly trolling, asking a flight attendant for a drink that doesn't exist. And so it's hilarious in retrospect, but in real life, this was like a nightmare scenario that you don't want to wake up to. You don't want to be in this scenario. You're waking up to this flight attendant who's mad at you because you've been asking for a drink that doesn't exist, and you have no idea how you got in this situation. And so I think I just tried to apologize and de-escalate the situation. It was probably weird for him. It was like this sudden snap to, sorry, man. No, that's fine. Just water, you know? And I was getting the funniest looks from some of those other people around me. Planes are interesting with sleep deprivation. I remember another time, I was on a plane, I was sleep deprived, and I was spending a lot of time thinking. I was spending a lot of time contemplating the nature of experience and how it is to perceive time. I was trying to catch where is now? Where is now? You know, when does a moment become the past? That's such a small little window. It's hard to look at that exactly, you know? When does the word become go from past to present? When I'm saying become, and I've already made it to the second syllable of that word, right? I've said come, be is already in the past, right? Which is weird to think about. And I was trying to really, really zoom in my perception and see if I could notice when that change happened. See if I could notice what this sense of nowness even is. And I continued on this spiral of strange thoughts and meditation similar to that, where I reached a point that the sound of the people next to me who were speaking, it suddenly started to sound like just pure sound, pure noise, deconceptualized, right? They were speaking English, but I had somehow focused hard enough on the presentness of the sound, of the immediate instant moment of what was happening and being heard and experienced, where it was like I suddenly flicked a switch where I went from hearing English to just hearing pure sound. And this it freaked me out. You know, I laughed a bit at how strange it was. And I've still never been able to experience anything like that, where this language that you know so well suddenly sounds like how it probably sounds to people who don't speak it, you know? And it was uncanny. It was crazy. Anyway, back to this long day I've told you so much about. I don't sleep at all on the, whatever it is, 10, 11-hour flight or something. I probably watched some shitty movie on the TV, you know, in the middle of the aisle. I probably flipped through a book, maybe tried to listen to some music. The flight eventually arrives in LA, in Los Angeles, and this is about 1:30 a.m. UK time. So I've now been awake for 36 hours-ish, almost. I go through immigration, which was, you know, ceremonial. It felt like I was in a movie or something. You know, the lady looks at they see I have an American passport, and they go, oh, welcome home. You know, I felt like I was Leonardo DiCaprio or something. So I go retrieve my checked bag, and you do this so that you can recheck it for your connecting flight, which is not the most fun. And so I have to go through security again. And I remember that this time they made me take everything apart. And they looked through everything, and there's something so funny about pulling out a motherboard with a massive CPU cooler with random just padded foam taped around it, you know, pulling this out of your backpack, and the security people just being like, "What is this, huh?" And me having to explain to some normies why someone would even do this, right? Let alone what this is. And I remember one of the other security guards asked me about that With Fire and Sword book, and I think I did my best job of explaining it. I was like, "Oh shit, okay, let me talk about this." And I didn't really even consider why he asked. You know, I was like, "Why did this guy ask me about this?" Anyway, I managed to repack it somehow, which was the thing I didn't want to do. I was like, okay, I took out all this shit that took me so long to get in there. Now I gotta put it back in. That's okay. I did a good job. Not as good as I did before. It's good enough. So now, about 3.5 hours after I've landed, my connecting flight to my final destination finally takes off. And at this point, you know, I'm so close. I'm so amped up. I'm just not interested in sleep. It had its own level of surrealness too, just to be back in America. So by the time I arrive, my dad picks me up. I've been awake for close to 43 hours. And it's weird being in this airport that I haven't been in a long time, and seeing these roads I haven't seen in a long time. And, you know, the whole thing felt like a dream. I just remember coming to his new house that I'd never seen before, and he gave me a tour. I was impressed at how well taken care of it was, how much better taken care of it was than any of the houses I'd lived with him in before. And I think I just announced at some point, I'm like, yeah, I really should go to sleep. We could probably hang out. I should just go to sleep. And so there I am in some new room, in some bed I've never been in. All my bags are still packed. You just drop them somewhere, and there's nothing left to do but give in. It was amazing that all that happened in that one long today. You know, this today. I woke up in England, and I'm falling asleep in America. And at last, today comes to an end. And wow, I didn't expect to talk about it as long as I did, or that it would take as long, I guess. I was like, yeah, I'll just make a quick little 8-minute long thing, you know, quick little 8-minute long video. Anyway. So one of my other favorite times, I want to sneak one more in there that comes to mind when I think of staying up for a really long time. It was a particular day where I stayed up for a long time, basically forcing myself to do creative stuff, forcing myself to keep being creative and keep being creative and keep going and keep going. And it was definitely one of my earliest experiences with staying awake for a long time. And so there was this novelty to it where I was thinking, you know, holy shit, what is happening? I've never felt something like this before. And I'll link to the project that I'm about to describe in the description, so you can listen to it later if you want. But I basically woke up this one day and I was feeling super spontaneous, energized, and I wanted to make some music, and I wanted to just get it out. I wanted to express something right here, right now. I wanted to pile drive through it until it was done, so that it could be finished before I could even look at it, you know, to know what it is or is becoming. I just wanted to power through it. And so the basic concept for that music was that I was going to improvise some random drum parts using whatever items I had to play drums. I'm not really a drummer per se, but I had drumsticks at the time, so I used some items in my room to create a very makeshift drum kit. I used these sticks to hit a dictionary taped to a bowl, a mug, a metal clip on a bag I had, I think. I used that to record 3 song-length performances of me just improvising, hitting these objects. And so next, my plan was to lay some stuff over this. I was going to record guitar, then bass, then I wanted to borrow a keyboard from my friend, play some stuff on that, and then sing over it at the end. And I tried to do them all as quickly as possible. That's what I wanted. I wanted to just go before I even know what's happening, you know? And so I stayed awake that entire first night when I started the project. And I didn't finish it in all, you know, one go, as much as I would love to, of course, but I got a lot done. And the most bizarre feat from that first session was that I had basically written and recorded guitar parts for 12 hours. Not straight, but with some breaks in there. 12 hours overall. And so that kind of thing is a little physically demanding, but it's mostly the demand is mostly that you're asking a lot of your mental capacity. And or your soul, or whatever part it is in you that does the creative stuff, that generates ideas. But interestingly, what happens and what I found when I force myself to be creative over and over for so long, right in a row, kind of similar to how we described getting that second wind, and then you get the third wind, and then eventually you just switch on. In that same way, if I work through the difficulty, I kind of just end up in this space of insane, perfect flow state where I'm instantly coming up with ideas, and everything is very, very easy, you know, where you're only limited by your body or the instrument you have to express it through. You're imagining it instantly, you know. It's the medium of output now is the restriction on the speed. And so I specifically remember recording guitars all night/day, and then going to my friend Rob's place, he was a guy I would occasionally jam with. We might have a beer or two and exchange stories. And I remember just showing up at his place and feeling a little too good and being like, dude, I just recorded guitar for 12 hours and I haven't slept and I feel amazing. And he was a good sport. He was cool. We played a little guitar together, and we probably talked a bit. Rob was the type of dude who was already probably on the verge of being a bit manic all the time and kind of out there. So he was definitely, you know, the perfect candidate, totally ready and willing to match my zany, ultra creative, uninhibited trains of thought and stuff, and punch back too with some good force. He was super fun to have conversations with. So I did go to sleep that night, but over the next few days, I did end up sort of continuing that energy, that binge energy of recording this project as quickly as I could, which relevantly ended up being titled "You Now Is All You'll Ever Be." It was a dramatic philosophical epiphany for me that at that time was charging me up, you know, to really live to the fullest, whatever that meant to me at that time. And so, yeah, it exists. I've added a link in the description if you're curious and you want to hear how it sounded. It's kind of strange to look back at, because for a long time I you know, you're always self-critical of your work in some ways, but I really didn't like how my vocals turned out, and the overall, you know, the rhythm is so sloppy. And this makes sense. You know, I wasn't a very proficient singer or drummer at that time, and so I can cringe a bit listening back. But once in a blue moon, I can listen again, and this has probably only happened once, where I really listened back and I felt like I got it. You know, I enjoyed the energy of it, of what it stood for, which was saying fuck it to all your concerns and just saying work with what you have now and just express whatever it is you're able to, whatever you're capable of, bad vocals and shitty production included, you know. I definitely can become very obsessive and controlling with what I work on creatively, which probably is also why some things I make end up being kind of good, but it also, of course, can become, you know, unhealthily obsessive, and it causes you lots of stress, and it's not fun a lot of times. And so part of the reason I really like staying up way too late and hitting that state of abnormal euphoria is it tends to open me up and get me back on the path of being excited about life and appreciating how great everything is, appreciating it instead of being so critical about the details and being so concerned with how, and being so concerned with everything needing to be done perfectly or right or well or whatever. And nowadays, I don't do this sort of thing nearly as much as I used to. You could say I'm a little reformed, trying to build some stability into my life, but it still happens now and then. And it's definitely true that the body does well overall on a consistent sleep schedule, and it you know, it very much needs sleep. But even in spite of whatever you might sacrifice, right, to skip a night of sleep, I have always gotten so much value out of it in the way it makes me feel and in the way it makes me look at life in a new way. And that's what's important, because a lot of times when we have discussions about mind-altering experiences, whether that be sleep deprivation or drugs or relationships or games, we often reduce the experience down to just, oh, it's feeling good. You just want to stay awake all night to feel good. You just want to drink coffee or get drunk to feel good. You just want to kiss a girl to feel good. You just want to play TF2 to feel good. And while this is obviously true on some level, it's missing another important point. It might make you feel good, yeah. But for me, and I think for everyone, whether they realize it or not, the reason we really like these things so much is because of the kind of good it is. It's the good that lets us see life in new ways. Feeling good is one thing, and then feeling free because you're breaking out of your limited everyday sense of how things are going and what's going on, and you're inspired about what's possible in life. That's a totally different type of good. I'm going to bring in a little anecdote. I was having a good chat with one of my friends who's much older than me, and one of the people I consider very, very intelligent that I'm lucky to have talks with. And so we usually have these long discussions about psychology, psychoanalysis, and just generally the strangeness, I guess, of being alive and how we handle that. And I don't think it should be seen as particularly profound or a new idea to say that psych drugs don't fully fix your mental issues. But he put it in a way that I'm finding very relevant to what I'm talking about right now, which is he roughly said that a psych drug might elevate your mood or make you less miserable, but it won't give you inspiration or hope. And it's not to say that those things are mutually exclusive. Obviously, yes, sometimes just feeling better can be inspiring. But his point is, again, pointing to this distinction between those two types of goodness, right? A pizza is good. A pizza can be so insanely good. Let's go for a pizza, bro. It's pleasurable. It's enjoyable. But generally, it's not going to be the same type of good that makes you go, holy shit, I need to start setting goals. I need to dream bigger. Like, what the fuck? There's so much opportunity here, and if I don't ask for it, life might not give it to me. And that, I think, is fundamentally the value of mind-altering experiences. It's those changes of perspectives that it offers to us that's priceless. Because you think life is a certain way right now. You really do. But what if it's actually better than you think it is? And in the same token, because reality is subjective, I could say, what if it's worse? What if it's worse than what you think it is right now? And so either way, you have the power to find and try to get into those perspectives, those truths for yourself. So pick your poison wisely. Right? Okay. So that's a lot of talking. Whew. Love you guys. This was fun. It was an attempt to be more off the cuff, and I guess in the spirit of many of my past selves who tried to act on inspiration and not worry too much about the details. So I'd love if you could leave a comment about an experience you've had with a really long day or anything else I may have jogged your memory about. That's all. Thanks.